The Gospel reading for last Sunday is from Luke chapter 13, verses 31 to 35. At that very hour, some Pharisees came and said to Jesus, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." He said to them, "Go and tell that fox for me. Listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed away from Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you, and I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, 'Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord.'" There is a famous little church on a hillside overlooking Jerusalem. The hillside is the Mount of Olives, and the church is called Dominus Flavit, the Lord wept. I was lucky enough to be part of a pilgrimage to the Holy Land back in 1993 that was organized by the parish I then belonged to. It was at a time when I was wrestling with a call to ministry that I didn't really understand, and a lot of dilemmas around how on earth my family were going to react and indeed cope if I pursued it. Abandoning them for a week was a huge step for me, and I remember leaving 10 pages of handwritten instructions for Roger and my mother to work through about childcare, who had to be where when, and with what PE kit or swimming gear or reading book or whatever, and what routines would help the 3 children to get to sleep at bedtime. Of course, they coped perfectly well. The pilgrimage was a very intense time, and I found myself doing quite a lot of weeping myself without really knowing why. I have a very clear memory of sitting in that particular church one morning in the middle of a walk from Bethany back into Jerusalem and listening to the gospel reading we've just heard about Jesus' grief over the city. Behind the altar there is a large arched window with an outline of the chalice and host at the center of the design. The glass itself is clear, and through the window is a wonderful view of the old city of Jerusalem. In the little churchyard there were olive trees and wild spring flowers, but also a flock of chickens, and it was a very charged moment, listening to those words about Jesus' longing to bring his divided people together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, when one of these hens quietly walked in through the open door. The lament of Jesus over Jerusalem expresses his deep sorrow about the degree of conflict within it, and how for generations the city has rejected God's offer of love, and rejected and killed the prophets, as it would surely reject and kill Jesus himself, sent to take its people under his wing, to nurture in them new life and love. It is such an evocative lament, that grief of Jesus, that longing to gather in those who are lost, that sorrow for a city in turmoil. It makes you wonder how many cities is Jesus weeping over today, in Ukraine, in Russia, in Afghanistan, in Sudan, in Syria. So much turmoil. Evocative too is the image of the mother hen. How many mothers have we seen in the news media these last few weeks, desperately trying to offer protection to their children as they flee from relentless bombardment, from life in cellars and basements, from lives that have been so suddenly turned upside down by the despotic actions of a president whose own people are also in for a very tough time, and who has sent young sons in to fight a senseless war that they never signed up for. Of all the metaphors the Bible gives us of Christ, the mother hen is perhaps the most homely and familial. If you watch a hen once she has hatched her eggs, her priority becomes the protection of her babies. She goes from an individual mindset to a communal one. If they suffer, she suffers with them. That is what that image tells us about God's love as seen through Christ. God mourns when his children suffer. God desires his children to be gathered as one, not at one another's throats. Jesus used the image in response to death threats from King Herod. In worldly terms, violence usually begets more violence. But here in Jesus' reaction to such threats, and in the way he later faced his passion, there is none of that. Here, in response to acts of violence and abuse, what does he speak of? A mother hen gathering her children, protecting them under her wing, and keeping them from harm. That is the desire of our God. As our journey through the season of Lent progresses, we're reminded of the journey Christ made to Jerusalem and to the cross. Luke puts great emphasis on this journey of Christ in the central section of his Gospel. The journey provides the context for a great deal of Christ's teaching and for the casting outs and healings that he refers to in his response to the Pharisees. And it highlights for us Christ's understanding that he must undergo the suffering and death that awaits him there, for his journey is rooted in the purposes of God. Jesus talks about today and tomorrow carrying on with his work, and on the third day it being finished. We are reminded of that other third day, the day on which he rose again, and we are meant, of course, to see the connection. So Herod, who puts to death, is contrasted with God, who brings new and risen life. Whatever happens, whatever the power of evil tries to impose, the movement towards bringing in God's kingdom will never cease. St. Paul talks in his letter to the Philippians about those who live as enemies of the cross. But we, Paul insists, are called to be different. We are called to be so assured of the redeeming love the cross reveals and of our heavenly citizenship because of it, that we are truly free to live a life that is marked by hope and trust and the joy of being obedient to God's will in the service of Christ. So help us, God. Amen.